Know who your top customers are, have good relationships with them, because you're going to have to be able to say that you do have good relationships with them in the contract. And again, get complete signed copies. And there are specialized issues in any transaction that you're dealing with in certain industries. Government contracting, we deal a lot with here. Probably 75% of all our sales involve government contractors. So we have a whole government contracts team that handles the due diligence side of that to make sure that we're in compliance, at least from our client's perspective. IP, intellectual property. Not everybody has patents. In fact, fewer and fewer companies have patents that they own. But one of the issues that we often see is that the founder never assigned the patent to the business in the first place. And so he's the owner or she's the owner of the patent. And the buyer is going to say, well, I'm not buying your business unless the business owns the patent. You've got to assign it to the company, so on and so forth. That's not very difficult. It's just knowing what you have. Copyrights, trademarks, trade names, you'll know if you have that type of stuff, and an expert will help in transitioning all of that to the buyer. The one where I see more complexity and more problems today is in software. There's a lot of development going on using open source software, which is available to the general public. And so you can basically use an open source software platform to do development on, and then you are building something that you may, quote unquote, own, that you want to sell to the third party buyer. Well, the open source, you cannot sell it. You don't have the right to sell it. So you have to be able to segregate the development piece, what you did in terms of your source code or your object code, from the open source code. And you have to be able to identify that in writing in your sale contract as part of the sale process. And you have to be able to verify that you in fact own this code that you developed by virtue of the contracts that you have with your customers. So we have an issue going on right now with a seller where they are having trouble identifying what software they in fact develop, because they develop on open source all the time. A lot of Linux developers are in that world. So I'm maybe talking over you, I may be talking right at you, but that's a big issue. Domain names. Trade secrets is another squishy issue. What is a trade secret? It can be a very broad definition. It's a process or a way of doing business that you've developed on your own that nobody else is using, at least to your knowledge. It's not patented, it's not copywritten, but it's a secret. And so if it gets out, it could do damage to your business. How do you protect it? Using non-disclosure agreements that are well drafted and enforceable. And you have to sometimes enforce these non-disclosure agreements. So the world of intellectual property involves intellectual property lawyers. You want to get them involved if needed in this sale process. Real estate, if you own property and you're conveying it in the sale, there are all kinds of issues that come up. Are there environmental issues? My family sold the shopping center several years ago in which a dry cleaner operated. Immediate flag, red flag. Dry cleaners in the old days to the current day were dumping chemicals, dry cleaning chemicals, which do damage to the environment. So you have to do phase 1, phase 2 studies, and then you have to remediate, which may cost a lot of money to remediate these types of problems. If you're not selling the property or you're leasing it, you still could have environmental liability depending on what you're doing in the business. So again, having real estate lawyers involved to make sure that we've got complete copies of the leases, not just the old lease, complete copy of the lease, all the amendments, all the property descriptions, all the rules and regulations, have it in the file, post it to the data room, and make sure you have the ability to assign your lease. If you don't, you may have this change in control provision. We have to have a discussion with the landlord sooner rather than later about transitioning it to a new buyer. They're usually looking for a buyer who has greater wherewithal than you to service the lease. And as long as you've got somebody like that, it should be easy. But some landlords are very greedy. You know, greed is good, as Gordon Gekko said, right? So greed is good, the landlords may want to get compensated. In fact, your lease may have a provision that requires you to pay something to the landlord to transition it to a new tenant. even though they're just buying stock. And then environmental issues. We're almost done. Taxes. Probably the deepest and most complicated representations and warranties in the transaction relate to taxes. And so you've got to have tax lawyers and CPAs scrutinizing all these reps and warranties and making sure that you're up to date on all your taxes, that you haven't inadvertently terminated your S Corp election, that you've got all the forms. When you elected S status back in 1998, you've got to have the form 2553. They're not going to close without it. So you can request it from the IRS, but it's better to keep your books and records up to date. Understanding all the income tax nuances, there's so many issues that come up, state and local as well. Payroll taxes, a huge issue, and sales taxes, a huge issue. Unpaid payroll taxes, unpaid sales taxes. Has to be remedied before the transaction is closed. Any questions on taxes? It's fun stuff. And last but not least, the accounting side of things. The integrity and the completeness of your financial records is paramount to closing the deal. If you've got your books and records in good order before you close, and the accountants have come in and made sure of that ahead of time, you're undergoing an audit, for example, that's good. Financial statements, are they GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles, compliant? Are all the tax returns filed and on time? There's no audit going on. If there is an audit going on, what are the issues under audit? And do we have good projections of future operations and budgeting in place so that we can sell the business? Because the buyer, when they come in, they're looking for all this stuff. They're looking for the projections. They're looking for the good, sound financial record keeping. And the projections, are they based on reality? And if they can tie those projections back to historical performance, and it makes sense to them based on what you've been doing and what your waterfall is, your backlog is, whatever you're basing those projections on, if they can look at that and it makes sense, as opposed to some just hockey stick, they'll be much more likely to give you what you want for the transaction. And then, of course, identifying the add-backs, the personal expenses, the expenses that aren't going to occur because the buyer will have their own CFO, and they're going to eliminate yours, or they'll not allow you to run personal expenses through. And so we add them back, and our cash flow is enhanced, our value may be enhanced. So next time, which we're going to take the summer off, we'll be back in September, because I need a break. And we'll be back in September, and we'll talk about the exit. We're going to do an M&A case study, the anatomy of a merger and acquisition transaction, starting with hiring the investment bank, going through the investment banker's contract, going through the letter of intent stage, and negotiating that, how that usually works and how it successfully works. And then going through the merger and acquisition transaction itself. The due diligence process, we've talked a little bit about getting ready for it, but it can be really harrowing. The biggest difficulty that I've seen clients go through are what are called quality of earnings analysis, where they bring in outside accountants and they scrub your books and records and they say, your numbers are wrong for this reason, that reason, or another, and they try to get you to adjust the purchase price. And sometimes they succeed. But that'll be fun. And then the last session will be in October, and we'll be dealing with post-exit planning. How you deal with clients, how you deal with your own situation, what do you do? I think, again, it's all about planning. Having a plan for the rest of your life after you sell the business, after you're out of the business, is always a helpful exercise to engage in. Thank you so much. Hope you all have a great summer, and thanks for coming today.
Thank you.